The purpose of this study was, as I said, it's for our non-represented employees. Our represented employees, we, as you probably recall, towards the end of 2022, we ratified a contract with them. So the purpose of this salary study is to bring non-represented wages to comparable market ranges. The last comprehensive study was done in 2016. And so that information, that data is getting stale now. We are also addressing inflationary and healthcare plan costs. Our healthcare plan rates increased over 9% for 2024. And we are also addressing the ability to compete with other employers who have already implemented wage adjustments in 2023. And we are also looking at this so that we meet the Washington State exempt salary threshold rates for our exempt employees. So there were specific areas of concentration.
Just a second, the last item you mentioned, could you explain that a little bit more?
The Washington State. So Washington State Department of Labor requires that if you have staff members who you determine are exempt employees, so we have exempt and non-exempt employees. Exempt employees have to meet certain criteria in terms of the level of responsibility and the type of job they do, decisions they make, on their own, they work independently. To counteract, exempt employees are not eligible for overtime. So in order to not have employers just call employees exempt, to not have to pay them overtime, there are salary thresholds that you have to meet, and you have to pay an exempt employee, and they're compensated at a higher level. They don't get overtime, but they are not required to work specific hours. So that's the difference between non-exempt and exempt. Is really the big difference is if you pay overtime to them or not.
And so the study, presumably, we're going to hear met those thresholds or are meeting them?
It addresses that, yes. Right. And that was that's one of our goals, to make sure that those employees who we determine should be exempt are meeting those thresholds.
Thank you.
So the area, thank you. The areas that we concentrated on were our hard to hire positions. And I know we've discussed this in these meetings before. Those specific positions are journeyman mechanics, our road support supervisors, and information technology. Those have been difficult for us to recruit for. And we are also addressing pay compression between supervisors and the employees that they do supervise, because we were in a situation as there was compression with the supervisors, and it's really difficult for us to recruit for our supervisors because the wage difference is not significant enough between that position and the position they supervise. We reviewed positions for exempt and non-exempt status to meet the Washington State minimum thresholds. And we are also looking at being able to compete within our market to hire the best candidate and to retain staff. And those have been challenges for us. We are also consolidating positions of similar levels of responsibility and skills in this. Our current hierarchy doesn't do that as well. And we're also establishing a consistent progression between position levels. And yeah.
So when you're combining some levels of responsibility or skill, so in a sense, you're kind of putting two jobs together or two tasks?
They're in the same level, so that's how it is now. We have in one level, you may have several different positions that, and the intent is those positions all have similar skill and responsibility levels. So they may, two different positions may have the exact same wage range. They're different jobs, but their level of what's required for those jobs is similar, so they're placed on the same level.
Oh, okay.
So what we're trying to do is just, as things have changed over since 2016, some positions have changed, people in those positions have changed. So what we have done is looked at all our positions to say, what are these like positions and where do they belong compared to the market?
Well, it looks to me, from the first sentence, that you're looking at both represented and non-represented positions.
We are only looking at represented positions in terms of a benchmark to compare who supervises those positions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
this was just based on non-represented.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
And then we are also looking at placement of new positions in the appropriate level of the wage scale. And next slide. So we went out to bid for this, and the contract was awarded to Gallagher. And we have two representatives from Gallagher here with us today, Larry Robertson and Tracy Morris. They are going to actually present the study and what was done in a little more detail for you. And I will hand it off to them, but I also wanted to mention that the costs of the wage adjustments that we will be recommending are included in the 2024 draft budget that is being presented today. So we're not asking for funds outside of the budget. It's been included in what's going to be presented to you today.
So for our budget today, then Paul was very keen working with others to be sure that we would have the money, so it wouldn't be a big switch to add on, I'm assuming.
It's included in the budget, and on the budget summary, you can see where, you know, the effect that it had on the budget. Yeah, I guess to answer that question, I would say that the budget is showing a reduction in reserves for the year, but that's pretty much on par with last budget.
Okay. I figured you're always ahead of the game and foresight to be sure that you kind of have things lined up if you don't have all the numbers yet. So that's great for you guys.
And I'm going to hand this over to Larry Robertson and Tracy Morris. And they'll do their presentation and we can answer any questions you have after that.
Could I ask my question now? I apologize. I know it's hard to see the raised hand and I didn't want to interrupt because it wasn't timely to the slides. I was looking to see if this presentation or this study was in our packet and did not see it in our packet.
It is not. We were actually making adjustments up until yesterday on this. So we can provide this to you.
Thank you. That'd be helpful. I appreciate it.
So good morning. My name is Larry Robertson. I'm a senior consultant with Gallagher. And I'll let Tracy introduce herself as well, and then we'll progress through the presentation that we have for you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone. I'm Tracy Morris. I'm a consultant with Gallagher as well. Happy to be here and happy to have worked on this project.
So here are the items that we're going to be looking at. We'll be talking about the study background, which quite honestly, Robin has covered most of that. We'll talk about our methodology for the project. We'll talk about the market comparisons that we found as we finished up with the benchmarking process. Then we'll talk about the salary structure options that we came up with in the estimated costs for implementing those. Then we'll talk about some recommendations at the end.
Good, let's go.
What's that? Was there a question?
No.
Okay. So as Robin's already mentioned, Island Transit contracted with Gallagher Benefit Services to conduct a study to evaluate the market position of staff compensation. To be more specific, non-represented positions. This analysis included a custom survey of peer organizations, and we'll show you those in a moment. We collected data from published surveys also, including Comp Data, Economic Research Institute, Mercer, and Willis Towers Watson. And then we used that data to determine the market value of the evaluated positions. By the way, if anyone has questions as we go through this, feel free to jump in and ask those questions. So the data from the custom survey was collected in what we call a data collection form and is being leveraged in the study. It covers things like base salary, salary ranges, and whatnot. The following organizations you see listed here were invited to participate. Quite honestly, not all of them did, but a good portion of them did. Just a quick overview. We have to have at least 5 responses on every position to be able to use the data for that. And that's a federal regulation that governs what we do when we take information from custom surveys. So the majority of what you will see, we did have that response enough to where we could utilize the data for this study, so we could leverage it in such a way. Any questions on this particular slide?
Larry, I just have a, excuse me, a quick question. So the agencies that we compared ourselves against that you used in the study, I would assume are ones that are similar in size, and then those that are direct competitors to us?
Yes, typically we look at size, and Robin helped us obviously with the choosing of which were the appropriate agencies. There's probably other things that go into the transit that are specific to you. We also looked at budgets, numbers of employees, areas served, those kinds of things as we chose these. Looks like Janet may have a question.
Yeah, Larry, thank you. Is when you're doing your survey and looking at these entities, the cost of living varies between Clallam and community transit, right? The cost of living in Snohomish is very different than the cost of living in Port Hadlock. Do you take that or CPI or some other indicator into consideration when you're looking at the like-kind organizations?
Right, we actually have a slide that's going to address that.
Well,
But
then
we
I'll
do
just
what
be
we call
quiet.
a geographical differential adjustment. But that's a good question, Janet. We usually don't get that question ahead of time, so thank you for that.
Did all of these organizations that you had listed there, did all of them reply, or these were the ones that were invited?
These are the ones that were invited. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact list of who actually participated. Tracy, do you have that information at hand? I want to say that we had about a dozen that participated, but I'm not sure how accurate that is.
Yeah, I can definitely pull it up. Wait, I don't have it open, but I'll pull that up. But yes, these were all invited. They did not all participate though.
What I'm thinking about is it would be helpful to know if the Oak Harbor School District participated because they run a bus fleet on Whidbey Island. So it would seem that it would be helpful if they participated.
They did not. Specifically, that one did not.
They did participate when we did the represented, because the school district doesn't have the same dispatching and operations, the same scope of that we do, but they were important when we were looking at bus driver positions and wages.
And I might mention too that someone may, or one of these institutions or agencies may have participated in the study. But if they did not, see, how do I want to say this? If we didn't have enough that participated that indicated they had a position, then we were unable to use that data. So we may have had 13 of these agencies that all participated, but if only 3 of them listed they had a bus driver and gave us information on that bus driver position, then we would not be able to use that data in the survey. Does that make sense? Because again, by federal regulations, we have to have at least 5 responses in order to use the data.
Larry, could you speak just a little bit louder? Sometimes towards the end, you drop your voice and I'm just having a little bit of a hard time, but it could be my age. I don't know.
No, I can certainly do that. I actually hear the same request from my wife on a regular basis, so
Okay.
it's not unusual. So one of the things that we want to make sure is that we have done our due diligence on our work and make sure that it's QA'd. So someone other than Tracy and I has taken a look at this data at some point in the process to make sure that we've done it correctly and used the right formulas and all those kinds of things. And then in addition to that, Robin has also taken a look at this and helped us to identify a couple of concerns that we've addressed as well. One of the things that we do is that the data that we're collecting may be from 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago, those kinds of things. So we use what we call aging methodologies to bring that data up to date. And so we get the information in order to do that from the World at Work Salary Trends Survey. And these are specific to your area. So in order to bring the salaries that we found in the data up to the date of November 1st, we used 5.4% for the salary portion of that and 4.3% for the salary structure adjustments. So for the salary information that we received, if it was a year old, we would have brought that up to 5.4% by 5.4% to bring it to the November 1st value that it should be. The same thing would be true with salary structures, their minimums, midpoints, and maximums. If they were a year old, we would use 4.3% to bring that up to date to November 1st. If the data was only 6 months, then we would have used half that percentage. So it is prorated if the data was newer. Any questions on that? Okay. Geographic differentials. Janet, here's your question. This is fairly common practice. And the reason we do that is exactly what you said. The cost of labor and the cost of living is different from one place to the next. I'm not sure what your gas prices are like currently in your area. But this morning I noticed that I could buy gas here in Oklahoma City area for about $2.42 a gallon, which I would imagine is significantly different from what it is where you are. So we use the Economic Research Institute to come up with the factors that we use to bring that data to be the same as what it would be for your area. And that way we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, so to speak.
You'd be comparing apples to watermelons with that number.
Well, quite honestly, I'd rather eat a watermelon than I would an apple. So,
Come on out and try it.
So here's a list of the geographic factors that we used. And those are available for you to look at, and you'll see these when you receive a copy of the presentation, which Robin's already said we'll do that. So, in looking at this, the geo factor, for instance, for Burlington, Washington, was 97% approximately of what your cost of living would be or cost of labor would be. And so we would adjust the information that we received from Burlington by this factor so that it was equal to your data as well. Any questions on that? All right. So when we start looking and comparing to market, I just want to talk about what we're meaning when we say comparing to market. At the 25th percentile, most employees in their career are in the first 1 to 5 years of their career. And then as you look at the 50th percentile, which we consider to be the market, is the 50th percentile. Most employees that are in that area are going to be in their careers maybe 5 to 10 years, possibly a little bit longer than that. And then as we look at the 75th percentile, those are employees that have been working for 10 or more years, and some maybe even thinking about retirement. Quite honestly, most organizations that we deal with, most of their employees fall within the 25th to 50th percentile. Not all, because I know you all have at least one employee that I think is got 30 plus years, as I recall. Any questions on this particular slide? This is really more just some information to give to you as we look at the comparisons. When we look at those in a moment. Okay. Now, as we compare your data to the market data, if it's 0 to 5% difference, then we would say you're highly competitive. You're very close to being what the market says it should be. If you're 5 to 10%, we would say you're still pretty competitive, but might need to think about some adjustments. If you're 10 to 15%, we say that's slightly misaligned and probably should take a look at those positions that fall within that category. And then if it's 15% or more, we would say it's significantly misaligned. And so it'd be important to take a look at that. There may, if that's 15% below the market, that may indicate that you're probably having some problems retaining employees in that particular position or hiring folks into that position. Any questions on that?
Keep going, please.
Okay, the 50th percentile, as I've already mentioned, we consider that to be the market. That's where most of our clients want to be, is at the 50th percentile. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, depending on what the organization's strategic plan is and things of that nature. So here's where we start getting into the fun stuff. This is what you've been waiting to see. This chart shows how you compare to the market. Now, those first three columns, the 17, the 4%, and the -8%, that's a comparison of your employees' salaries to market. So what we did there was, for the positions that we used as benchmark positions, we took the average salary for those employees and compared it to the average salary in the market for those same positions. And what we found was that the 25th percentile, remember that's where you have your employees are in the first 5 years of their career. At the 25th percentile, you're 17% above the market, which is a good thing. You're leading the market, that right area. We used that same average salary to compare to the 50th percentile, and you're still pretty competitive. You're at 4%, so you're 4% above the market, even at the 50th percentile. And then you'll see that at the 75th percentile, you're about 8% below the market. And again, remember, we're using that same average salary for all three of these comparisons. So it makes sense when you're comparing to the 50th percentile, where their average is going to be higher, that your average would drop a little bit, or that percentage would drop a little bit, if that makes sense. Same thing's true of the 75th percentile. One of the things to note as well, that there are other factors that can factor into this, such as performance, how long somebody's actually been at your organization compared to how many years they've actually been in their career, and things of that nature.
Larry, we have a question from Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. So just curious as I try to make sense of things, if the market 75th differential is 8%, so it looks like we're competitive in the middle or per your slide spectrum, leading in the first thing. Is it possible that that last one is due to compression? Because as we went through tough times a while back, and so there were some salaries that got frozen for a while, or there were some decisions made to get us out of that tough time. And then we began to invest in our employees, and we had recruitment investment strategies. Is it possible that that third category is due to compression based on those other efforts that we made?
Sure, that could certainly be a factor, yes. Somebody else was making a comment, I missed it. Okay, again, remember that, just for an example, let's say the average salary was 40,000. At the 25th percentile, the market's average salary may have been 60,000. So that's why, I'm sorry, they got those backwards. Let's say that the market was $40,000 and that your data was $60,000, then that would show a higher percentage. Then as we look at the 50th percentile, if the market data is 60,000, and we're still using that 60,000 for your data, then they would be about the same. And then as we look at the 75th percentile, the market data may show 80,000, but we're still using that $60,000 average salary. So that's a lot of times why it's going to show a little bit of a deficit at that 75th percentile. There's a number of things that can go into this to cause the different.
Can I jump in there? Commissioner St. Clair actually she is dead on there. What happened back in 2016, because of the financial status of the agency, our wage grid, and then a decision was made that it was not annual increases. And actually Larry will address this in the following slides, which made it take longer for employees to move through the scale, and it took longer and they weren't making as much. So I think that's what Commissioner St. Clair was asking, and she's absolutely right. People weren't placed in where based on how long they've been doing the job, because the agency had to stagger wages at that time.
We had a question from Commissioner Bacon.
Yeah, thank you. I can see that the range is being off, but this data is showing that our pay is where it needs to be. Before I moved to Whidbey Island, I was the international compensation manager for a Fortune 500 corporation. So I've done this kind of thing many, many times. And I just want to share with my colleagues that all the methodology I've seen here today is very standard. And I'm not seeing any kind of concerns or issues at all in the methodology that was used by Gallagher.
We have a question now or a comment from Councilman Seer, please.
I'm curious to know about in your first bullet there, you talk about the quote benchmark positions. Were those provided by Island Transit? And what were those benchmark positions? If I'm just curious, like, are we talking about the operations manager? I mean, how many of them, how many were there, et cetera, or are they all just averaged together?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Larry, if you're okay with that.
Okay. Please,
Yeah,
Tracy.
so we work together to develop the benchmark job list. A good benchmark job is a job that is commonly held across the industry that we can identify at your peers, right? That job is easily identified at multiple locations. So it's not going to be that unicorn job that no one else is doing, right? It's the very common job, high incumbents typically, or if it's a single incumbent job, it's a job that we can find easily in the market. And so in terms of how many jobs we benchmarked in the market, you had 33 jobs that we went to market and were able to come back with actual data. So yes, this is an average of all 33 of those jobs and how together they all compare to the market.
So of those 33, it's conceivable that a couple of them might be I could concede that a couple of them might not be competitive, but if you average 33 together, you would be competitive.
Yes,
So
that, yeah.
I'm a little worried it's hard to imagine every single one of them is competitive in the market.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It is fair that there were a handful that were either high to market or low to market, and we've looked at all of those and addressed them appropriately. So, like Robin said, some of this was to look at those hard to fill positions and either say, is it salary that is the issue that's causing them to be hard to fill, or is it something else? And so, yes, you are correct. And so you're
It's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, these questions wouldn't be necessary if we actually had the name, so anyway.
Continue, please.
Sure. And I might just mention too that, we'll be providing information on what positions need to be looked at and things like that to Robin. One of the other things is we slotted these positions, so to speak, into the new salary structures. We addressed most of that as well as a part of the process. So looking at the other three columns over to the far right, the range min, the range mid, and the range maximum, that was comparing your ranges to the market ranges that we found. And what we found was that the range minimum, you were right on. You were right where you needed to be. And at the midpoint and the maximum, we found that you were 11% or so behind the market. So we did need to make some adjustments there. And again, we've addressed those in the salary structures that we've recommended and that we're going to be using. So the salary structures that we recommended, we recommended updating the existing structure and using option 1 would be $20 as the lowest range minimum. In other words, that would be the lowest pay that you would have. Option 2 was updating the existing structure and using $20.50 as the lowest range minimum. And the third was to update the existing structure and use $21 as the lowest range minimum. Island Transit, Rob, and talking with Robin, we felt like that the $21 or option 3 was the best one for dealing with compression within the current structure and those types of things. This option aligns the pay structure very competitively to market as well. So, and as I was just mentioning a moment ago about what we do with the positions and things like that, it's important to implement the proposed salary range adjustments through a consistent pay implementation process to reduce potential salary compression issues and those kinds of things. Part of what we did was bring folks to the minimum. If they were below the minimum of the new range, then we would bring them to the minimum of that range. Then secondly, we looked at bringing them to the position in the range. In other words, if somebody was in in step 5, then as we look at the new ranges, we'd want to make sure that they were in an equal step as well. Okay, so we actually have 2 different implementation estimates that we're going to be showing you in a moment here. One of those was the market adjustment, which is the result of this conversation, the study, and all that went into it. The second is a result of the COLA that you're putting into place January 1. And as Robin has mentioned, I believe all of this is included in the budget already. One of the things that we want to make sure that we did as we went through this process, we wanted to make sure that nobody lost salary, nobody's pay went down. We want to make sure that employees would be paid within the new pay range, meaning there wouldn't be anybody below the minimum of the range, and salaries wouldn't go above the new pay range maximums. Any questions about this part of the methodology?
Yeah, I have a question, a couple questions. First thing, is the practice going to be that whenever there is a COLA, that the range is gonna be shifted to reflect the COLA, okay?
Yes.
And then my second question has to do with the range maximum, so I appreciate that no pay cuts will occur. Do we have any employees above the maximum of the range? So is our intention to freeze them until the range shifts up to,
It is,
Okay.
and that is a change.
okay,
We do, fortunately, I think by the looks of this, that will not affect many people, probably just one.
okay.
So, Robin, that means then if they're expecting to get a COLA, they're not going to get one?
If they are with if the new pay scale is approved and implemented, if they are still above the top of that scale, that's correct. They will not lose what they're making now,
Okay.
but they will just stay there until probably a year. If there is another COLA, that will bring them, then they will fall into the scale again at top of scale.
Okay, some businesses I know, when someone is, we're saying we want to hire you, and this is your starting pay, and this is what you can look forward to, so they can kind of see the steps. But there are some changes, does that help maybe keep an employee so that they know there's kind of a steady line that they will be moving up?
That's how we advertise, and we are actually required to let
Okay,
prospective employees know what their wage range is. Yes.
okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, please continue.
Okay. So this is the salary structure that we were recommending as a part of the study itself. As you can see, the range minimum here is $21, which is what we mentioned in the options. You can see here that we've progressed through this, and this is talking about the difference between the range midpoint 2359 to the next range midpoint. So there's a 10% differential until you get upwards into ranges 11 and 12, and we use a 15% there. We also have range spreads. The range spread is the difference between the minimum of the range and the maximum of the range. So we would take the minimum and multiply it times 1.25 to come up with the maximum of the range. And then the rest of this is all extrapolated down with the formulas that we use. Did I hear
Larry,
a
is there any
question?
way
or
you
remark?
could pinch that slide a little bigger, because it's really hard to read, and I think it's important for us to see that. Is there any way you can enlarge it somewhat?
I don't know that I can from my side. Let me try it
It's
and
not being
see.
gallery view, so that we didn't see
Yeah.
Larry.
There's a little bit there, but
That's way better.
Did you guys
That's
here
better.
eliminate the gallery view that one?
Yeah.
Please, thank you.
We're working on it.
There we go. Well,
Almost.
Yeah.
Much better. Give us a minute to look it over, please.
sure.
Thank you. That's fine.
I think I was
so
fine.
if you want me to read it in numbers, I can do that for you. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
How many positions do we have in range 12?
There will be 4 positions.
And how many non-representative employees do we have in range 1 and 2?
I don't have the, one I think is 1 and 2 approximately 10, 12.
Okay, thank you.
And would all this go into effect the 1st of January?
We
Or
are
their
recommending, and probably, there is a second slide, because what this is showing is where the study brought 2023 data. So this, what we then did is, our recommendation is, we wanted originally to be able to implement this in 2023, but we couldn't meet that. So our recommendation is to implement this on January 1st, 2024, and it would integrate the COLA to bring this to 2020. So we are in 2024 market range. So the next slide actually shows this data incorporating a 3.25% COLA. Our recommendation is we're consolidating it all and implementing on January 1st.
Can you have them show that slide?
Yes, Larry, can you go to the next slide?
Yes, there you go. And so you'll see the minimum for this is now $21.68. So that if the budget's approved and this is approved, then going forward, January 1st, that would be your minimum wage.
And in 12, it's 126. So 189 is the range.
And this is also, we've compressed, our current wage grid actually has 14 levels. So this has been compressed down to 12.
And that doesn't cause any difficulty with supervisor?
No, all of that's been taken into consideration. In our current one, we actually had a couple of levels that were almost exactly the same wage, just one was an hourly paid and one was salary. So we were able to eliminate some data like that.
At what point in this range are you gonna shift from being an hourly to salary, or is it gonna be based on job?
Great question. Level 6 is where exempt would start. However, with the caveat that within some positions that will be hourly paid, non-exempt. So there are a couple of anomalies like that.
Level 6 because
And that means Washington State.
okay.
Any other questions or comments on this one?
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the one where we talk a little bit about money. Okay. So the cost of the market adjustments that are as a result of the study, the adjustments to the minimum to bring folks to the minimum of the range and then placement within the range. The total costs are the cost of that's 120,000 and 365. And then you add in the cost of the COLA, the 3.25% COLA, and that brings our total cost to $623,748. Please realize that this is an estimate. There's a number of things that could affect and change this a little bit. Things like new hires, people leaving the organization, promotions, changing positions, those kinds of things.
So I think it's important for the board to really think about the fact that the COLA is only what, a third to a half, less than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of the total increase that we're talking about.
The 137,000 versus the 623.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a fifth.
Well, no, it's more than that. Of 623, 137 is more than a fifth of 623.
That's fine.
About 22%.
Yeah, so but the total increase is significantly more than what the COLA was that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I'm also a little bit interested in knowing, so there's gonna be a lot of people, everyone's gonna get some benefit from this because everyone's gonna get a COLA, right? But there's gonna be a lot of folks that are gonna get much more than a COLA from looking at this. And I'm from an employee relations perspective, I'm wondering if you've talked about what that is, the implications of that. How come this guy went and got, 8% increase and I only got a 3.25 increase?
We have discussed it. It's, a lot of this is also because the positions that we're looking at, that we were concentrating on, have bumped. That has an effect on the positions that supervise those positions. So, if we have, and we know that, some people will be will be happy with this and some people won't. It was the same situation, you know, on our last, the last time we did this. But it really, it is based on what those market values are and who we're competing with as well.
Robin, the individual that you mentioned that is above the revised standard, will they get the COLA or they will get it?
They would not receive a COLA.
Okay.
It's just, for me, my only irk about this is I would normally see something like this with this large of an increase for a market study if an employee base was underpaid. But we have a slide earlier that said that we're spot on at the midpoint. So it really looks like this is in order to bring employees in line with a new pay range, and a pay range is an arbitrary thing. I mean, it's arbitrary based on market, but there's lots of ways to design a pay range. And so, I mean, I can tell you if this was happening at the Board of Island County Commissioners, I wouldn't be in support of it. Because we squeeze every penny. I recognize that Island Transit has more money than proportionally. So I'm not gonna be that hardcore on it, but it seems like quite a bit of an increase in an environment where the data is not necessarily, it doesn't seem, but I'd have to look at the individuals, you know, all we had was a combined collective of, as an average, we're at the midpoint. So maybe after I see the data, I'll have a different opinion. But comparing this to that original one, it's hard to justify this.
And I totally get that. The important thing for us, me as the leader, is to make sure that we can retain like the people that are sitting in this room. And that's where we've had the slippage. That's where we haven't stayed up, and that's where we'll see the larger impact. And that's really important, because if we can't keep the good folks that we have, you know.
Corporate knowledge is a lot, and to have someone that you're practically hanging on to their toenails because please don't leave, you know, we need you, but and talking with nieces and nephews that are between 40 and 50 years old, and they are expecting to change jobs a lot because to go for the pay or someone's all, you know, something, but one, we're on an island, and if they don't live here already, will they move here or can they afford to move here is another thing. But if you don't keep corporate knowledge, and this is such a precise business, and to learn the ins and outs, like when the power goes out in some of our roads, I mean, the corporate knowledge says, okay, we did this in the past, this is what we planned. So it's a fine balance, but keep going on.
Can I interject here also? So you're correct that it does seem like we're adjusting that structure significantly, but the cost to really do that is that 121,000. That placement scale adjustment is so significant because of what we're going to say on the next slide. And I think we haven't gotten there, but one of your current practices is that your employees only move to the next step in their scale every 18 months. And when we surveyed your peers and asked if they had step schedules and how quickly their employees move through their step schedule, it's at a much faster rate. And so a lot of that 365,000 is an adjustment to moving your employees through your step schedule more quickly than they currently are. And so a lot of that cost is to do that, to catch your employees up to their annual adjustment rather than every 18 months. So I just wanted to mention that a huge part of that cost is that adjustment.
It's a great insight. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please.
Okay. So as Tracy's just mentioned, the step progression, as I recall, I think it's after the fourth step. It's only every 18 months currently. And as we did the custom survey, one of the questions we asked is how quickly do your employees move through the grades and how many steps do you have and things of that nature. The majority of them move their employees annually from one step to the next step. And so that's one of our recommendations, and it did increase the cost somewhat to do that. But we feel like that's going to make you more competitive with your peers in the area and things of that nature. One of the things that we would also suggest is that you review the structure annually, just like you're increasing it somewhat with the introduction of the COLA January 1. Those kinds of things need to be looked at on a regular basis, an annual basis. You can use World at Work trends, just like we did to age the data mentioned in an earlier slide, to update your salary structures. One of the things we would also do is that your next steps is to finalize the implementation. I think you've pretty much got it all ready at this point. I say that. Robin and her staff will have to go to work putting all this into the system and all those kinds of things and communicating to employees, things of that nature. But at this point, it looks pretty good, and I think it's a good recommendation. We would also recommend that you do a comprehensive study like this every 3 to 5 years. Even if you're updating your salary structures on an annual basis based on cost of living, CPI, any of those kinds of things, you still need to do something like this just to see that the market's changed and keep yourself in alignment with the market as well. Any questions that you might have?
One question happens for you, Robin. So when I read the first bullet step of recommended, move to the next step, annually, what is the performance evaluation? Is there a performance evaluation process that you can speak to,
Yes.
so it's not assumed that they get in step?
Yes, the goal is that there is annually, there is a performance evaluation on employees. So that if somebody isn't performing, that they are not guaranteed of moving to the next step.
Okay, so there's a standard that's set. You
Yeah.
have to be above.
Usually that goes in line with a performance improvement plan as well.
I'm assuming, Robin, that that's gonna be the action going forward. There's not gonna be, I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, that there's not gonna be a performance element to deciding whether or not someone gets placed in the structure.
Correct.
The new structure.
Our goal, our plan is that people will be placed in the new scale according to the amount of time, excuse me, that they have been in that job.
Right,
Yeah,
without performance being taken into account.
correct.
If they get an action plan to say, hey, sorry, but in evaluating your performance, you're not up to snuff. And you give them an action plan. So in 6 months or 8 months, or does it have to be another year before they can improve to be up there?
It depends. Usually the performance improvement plan is based on a 30-day assessment, 60-day, 90-day. And what normally ends up happening is if an employee is not performing, they end up moving out. We haven't had situations where we've held, if they do perform, then, they would, if they are meeting our expectations in the performance improvement plan and they have a step increase, we would give that to them as long as they are improving.
So anybody that's on a PIP right now would still get the adjustment?
If they were at, we don't have anybody in that situation right now.
That's great.
Um,
That's fine.
Yeah, and we haven't had somebody in that situation, but
Next slide, please.
That is the end of our formal presentation. So, any questions that we haven't answered yet, or any thoughts or comments?
Lance, do you have any questions from listening to the presentation?
No, I just think of all the years that the non-represented people have learned from the unions on what to offer to the membership and what to struggle for. But you guys are doing a good job. Thank you for that past hour.
All righty. Janet, I can't see you right now, so do you have any further questions?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm good. I thought this was a good presentation.
Righty, and I'm seeing we're getting new handouts.
All right.
thank you, Larry and Tracy.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us with you today. We've enjoyed the time with you and enjoyed working with Robin through this whole process. So we'll be providing her with a both data and a more detailed report as well.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, and y'all have a good day.
All right, same to you. Presentation number 2. Washington State
Madam
Audit.
Chair, this is Janet. I just want to note that I have to leave here in 20 minutes. I want to confirm you have quorum for any action items.
We do expect action items, there are, you know, the annual budget and then also surplus. And then we expect some action to come out of the executive session as well. Maybe we should do the budget next.
Okay,
So I apologize, my mother's having her post-op
You have
surgery and
quorum.
I have
We'll
no
have quorum, yeah.
flexibility. Thank you.
Okay. So you can go.
You can go whenever you wish.
We do have a quorum, Janet, so you're fine.
thank
was
you
my
for
question.
asking
Thank you.
and informing us. Appreciate that. So do we want to go to state auditors or go to the budget probably?
We'd probably like to be able to vote as much as we could.
Yeah.
Okay, can we do skip and go to the budget? Does
Just,
that mess you up,
oh,
Paul?
won't mess me up. I'm just thinking about the auditors. They were expecting to present about a half an hour ago.
Yeah,
Oh,
just,
Oh.
we can let them know that Meg can contact them, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right,
Good catch.
good morning.
All right.
I'll just touch on the highlights of the budget. In your packet, I think there was this budget highlights sheet with a summary of the highlights. I'll just touch on the changes from the last board meeting that we had. So the differences between final draft 2 and final draft 3. And it's really, that summary is on the second page. Says budget changes made since draft 1, but I'm just going to touch on the approximately last 10 items between draft 2 and draft 3. Each of the revisions was an addition to the budget, so it added cost to the budget. I revised the sales tax actuals, the forecasting, then adjusted the budget. I included a route match license, even though we were anticipating replacing route match, we'll still need to continue with that program during the transition period. The same is true with FleetNet software. That's our financial software, where in order to do our next year's budget, we'll need the information off of that previous database program. Then included is the Gallagher salary study. Made an adjustment for utilities, forecasting the cost going forward. Added the cost of the new software that we're using in the financial area, NetSuite, eCore, 2 separate programs. Then I removed diesel bus revenue, which we've already previously reimbursed. And then there were a couple of other requests for IT expenses, additional expenses. I added them to the budget. That puts us in a place where we have operating revenue at 26.5 million, about a 5.5% increase. Our operating expenses are forecast to be 21 million, about a 3 1/3 increase. And so we're in a position that it puts us is we have an operating surplus of 5.5 million. And that partially offsets 8.3 million capital deficit. So our total reserves are predicted to decrease by 2.8 million, about 4.5%, 4.66%. As Robin just mentioned, our medical premiums were up 9%, dental, no change. And some of the other items haven't really changed from our last meeting, so I won't repeat those. But there we have it. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Hi, Paul, thank you for this, and thank you for showing how the things have changed since the last time. My question is, do you have any budget adjustments that you're anticipating bringing to the board in, early 2024? Is there any things hanging out there?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I haven't heard anything.
okay.
Correct, any question?
Thank you, Paul. First of all, I know the amount of work that this takes, because Jenny and I see this beforehand, and it's a lot of work. I just want to emphasize to the board that, again, we're looking at having 77 operators, and we currently have 57. We're talking about a 35% increase. And
It's
so,
actually 60 with 3 more.
oh, we have, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I was just, looking at this. So that's a big lift, and I will be interested to see what kind of plans we're gonna bring forward to actually have that level of an increase. I'll be amazed if it happens.
And celebratory.
And celebratory, but I guess I'm challenging the staff is, how are we gonna do that?
Well, we have to continue to prioritize that, and that's what, when I talk to you about questions and other projects, that's part of my job, is to keep us focused on that, and I think we are doing a good job with that.
And you'll notice I'm not asking questions about those
Yeah, and we'll
lower
get there.
priority.
Yeah. Thank you.
Janet, do you have any questions for Paul?
This may be just brain fog, but I was a little off-putting of having so I appreciate that we have a net cash from operations. That's great. I was a little concerned or off-put that is going to offset a deficit in our capital planning, because I would have, without going back in my brain to all the details, would have liked to have just had our capital budget balance. Does that make sense to y'all?
Paul's thinking.
I'm not sure if I even heard it because it was a little bit soft, but,
We're spending capital.
our capital expenses are rather high, you might say, but we do have ambitious projects that we're undertaking with the South Lee Transit Center and the Camino facility, and others. The reason why I think you would anticipate a deficit is because all of our capital projects are not grant-based. And even if they were with an 80% match, we would still, incur a slight deficit. So in some regards, that's the nature of capital purchases, is that they're very large. And can't necessarily cover, or the grants don't necessarily cover, all the full cost of those projects.
But our reserves do.
Your match question answers my question, to be honest, Paul. That was why I was saying I think there's something obvious that I'm not thinking about, and your match question answered my question, or your match comment.
Which is also an issue too, is that we do have ample reserves to cover those capital purchases.
Jenny?
This is more of a comment than a question, and I know you're expecting it from me. Is there a possibility that come the new year, we could prioritize looking at that ICT IP investment piece of our portfolio? After watching it for the last 2 years, stagnate between 7 and 2.22, the cost of doing nothing is, I think when we did the math on it, we were at about $104,000 a month that we're behind had we moved that into another vehicle. So I'm not saying it has to be done. I just would hope that we can explore it,
Yeah, we
especially because we do have these big capital projects, and $1 million a year is a big chunk of
Makes a
change.
difference.
So I know it's not part of this budget, but if we can prioritize that for next
Okay.
year.
So, Jenny, has the finance committee ever asked Tony Lamb, the treasurer, to come talk with you and explain what his plans are regarding that?
Yeah, we have spoken a number of times.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have certain rules that they need to stand
Oh,
by.
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
He is trying.
I think this
And we know
topic is worth a discussion
Mhm.
in January as an actual agenda item in the board.
Right. Well, it could also be a board retreat item where we actually have some study and analysis that we present and give you a broader opportunity to ask questions, discuss. That's probably the better way to do it, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, thank you.
Lance, do you have any comments to add, hearing about the adjustments in our budget?
No, thank you.
All right. This is an action item.
So
And would someone,
I move to adopt resolution number 723, approving the 2024 annual budget of the Island County Public Transportation benefit area attached to Exhibit A and incorporated into this resolution by this reference.
Second.
we have a motion by Commissioner Bacon and a second by Councilman Jenny Bright to pass business item number 1 as read in the agenda. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any
I wasn't
opposed?
voting twice.
All right. All right, this passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking this out of order. I appreciate it. I will call in, Madam Chair, I will call in from the car as I travel up to my mom's appointment and catch in as much of the rest of the meeting as I possibly can. So you'll see me check out and then I'll come in by phone. That'll be a 360-544 number, or it could be a 206-792. I'm not sure which.
I'm trusting Meg will recognize the phone number.
Thank you. I appreciate your flexibility.
Yeah.
All right, we will switch back to the auditors, and I want to remind people, I jumped the gun. We had already approved the agenda, so it's a little bit out of order, but sometimes I skip over that before. I wanted to be sure not to miss it this time. So I see a happy auditor, so that must mean we're happy too.
And you have the materials at your place that Meg has handed out this
Okay,
the document that the auditors wanted you to have.
Yes, thank you for distributing that and the time just to meet with you today during your meeting. Can you hear us okay?
yes, would you introduce your team, please?
Yes, definitely. So as Jordan's presenting the PowerPoint, you can see our names in order as well. My name is Dina Garza, and I'm the audit manager of the team based out of Bellingham that performs the audit each year. With me today is Scott Hilton, who's an audit supervisor, and then Jordan Helms, who is the audit lead. And so each of us will be presenting a portion of today's conversation. Again, as reference, we have the PowerPoint that you can see visually, and then the packet that we've handed out. The packet just has everything that we're going to say verbally in writing. So it's great as you walk away, or if you're have any questions from your citizenry on what came from the audit. So again, this is the exit conference. So this is our summary at the end of the audit, just to circle back and let you know how everything went and what reports will be published. And so we'll talk about each of those pieces. Before we get too far into it, we always like to take just a pause to talk about why we appreciate these exit conferences so much and why we respect and value so much that you always want to do them as part of an open public meeting. It's because we're talking about the results, and the results of our audits can have impact. On the screen, we have 3 main goals that we see that come up throughout the audits, but that all show up in exit conferences. The first is, sorry, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. Yeah. Okay, good. The first is we have a vision in our office of an increased trust in government. Working with governments like you and others around the state, we see a lot of good in government, and we want to be able to tell that
Janet
story.
St. Clair joined the meeting.
Perfect. The second is, while we are independent, we want to make sure we're very transparent in our examinations. That's not only to all of you or the staff that we're working with, but also to the public. And that's one of the ways that we do increase public trust. We're publishing our reports online or answering citizen questions. We want them to know that we've looked at all of your numbers or your accountability, whatever it might be, and that they can rely and have faith in those controls that are in place. The third goal is an improved efficiency and effectiveness of government. We want to support what all of you and all of the staff that you represent are doing. And so anything that we are selecting for our audit, any recommendations that we're making are really with that in mind. We try and share best practices or suggestions. It isn't just a matter of making recommendations and leaving. It's really to support what you guys are already doing. In part, that improved efficiency and effectiveness shows up in our audit, but we also like to touch briefly on our Center for Government Innovation. Just being mindful of time this morning, I won't go through all of the details, but hopefully you have heard us talk about our center, or you and your staff have looked at that part of our website. It just looks for very proactive resources. Instead of having an audit come around and, let's say, review your payroll process, we have different guides of different considerations, different state laws that might be applicable, or best practices that we've seen in the industry. So on this slide, you can see a few of the different areas that we touch on. On the next slide, you see really what we would like to highlight, or what we're known for with the center, is some of those guides that I've talked about. So these are some of our most used, or most commonly right now. We do cover system conversions, procurement, EFTs or ACH payments, just common questions that we're getting, or common recommendations that might be showing up around the state. On the next slide, I wanted to highlight briefly a couple of the resources from the center that we shared during our entrance conference communication. The first is a Trust But Verify guide. That's actually our first that's directed towards elected officials, just talking about why internal controls are so, why we see such value in them, and the balance of governance versus oversight, and what we've seen in some unfortunate fraud cases around the state. The second that I would like to touch on more is our cybersecurity checkups. As you may know, we have several in-depth cybersecurity audits that we have available, all at no additional cost. These are funded through state mandates. But one of the recent ones that we saw is that those cybersecurity audits are very popular, and therefore there's a wait list. And what could we offer to governments in the meantime? So this cybersecurity checkup is a quick and free process. You work directly with a specialist in our office to go through some of the main 20 different vulnerability points. So we look for best practices and make different suggestions. And so that's something that, if you're interested, could be as easy as just emailing the center, and then they can work with you to schedule a time that works. So it's just a newer service that we want to highlight, and I wanted to share with you, not only for Island Transit, but for all of the different governments that you represent. With that said, why we really are all here today is the audit of Island Transit. And so I do want to go ahead and pass it to Jordan to talk about the audit that he performed. So Jordan.
Thank you, Dina. Okay, I'm glad to be able to be here and talk to all of you about the audit that we did this year. We did a similar audit scope as to what we have done annually for the transit. We had an accountability audit, as well as a financial statement, and then a federal grant compliance audit. So I'll go through just each one of them one by one, starting with the accountability. So the accountability audit was, like I mentioned, a one-year audit. Our audit scope was for fiscal year 2022. The accountability audit, we are looking at controls that are in place for safeguarding the transit's resources, policies that are in place, compliance with those policies, with state law. We don't look at every area or every transaction during these audits, but we focus on a few areas each year that are higher risk, either because of specific risks that we've seen during our planning procedures, specific to the transit, or maybe even transits statewide, or other governments around the state. Sometimes we cycle areas that are really significant, have a lot of dollar amount going through them, or just a higher inherent risk of either fraudulent activity or just errors, placed where there might not be as good of controls in place that we could make a recommendation. The current year audit, the areas that we looked at, in addition to the more baseline steps of looking at open public meetings compliance, focusing mainly on looking at the minutes, the documentation of the minutes, and especially executive sessions and how those are documented. Also considering the financial condition of the transit, looking for any indications that things might not be going as well in the future in terms of the financial resources or demands that are coming up. The big focus of the accountability audit for the 2022 year was looking at disbursements, and by that I mean non-payroll disbursements, accounts payable type transactions. So in addition to looking at more in general the process for just how is money approved to be paid out through accounts payable, we took the opportunity to look into credit cards, recognizing that there's a lot of activity, that a lot of transactions that go out that way, looking at the policies in place, controls to authorize and oversee that activity, and then also testing individual transactions that were showing up on credit card statements during the year. Our results for these areas, we did not identify any issues to report to you today for any of these areas. So we, in the report, it will have the language that the transit operations did comply with laws, regulations, and policies in the areas that we looked at. And again, we don't look at everything, but in the areas that we looked at, which are listed in the audit report, we didn't identify any issues. So a clean opinion there for the accountability audit report. Moving to the financial statement audit, again, we did a audit for 2022, looking at the financial statements that were submitted to our office, prepared by the transit. We performed the similar procedures to prior years, looking at going through the planning procedures, looking through and selecting material balances that are material to the financial statements in the current year, and then looking at the controls of how those are reported, as well as doing testing to make sure that they are accurately presented in the statements. Our review for financial statements also includes doing a full review of the actual presentation of the statements themselves and the note disclosures and supplementary information, seeing that it's presented correctly, in addition to accurately, but also in accordance with standards. So our financial statement report includes an unmodified opinion, so a clean opinion. There are no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, no findings, no other issues that are identified or are being reported about in our report. A couple other things to talk about with the financial statement audit. We did not identify any material misstatements. Also, there's no uncorrected misstatements in the statements, the final financial statements that will be published with the audit report. And then another area, special consideration that we do for all of our financial statements audit is recognizing the inherent risk that management who is overseeing all the financial activity and preparing financial statements could make changes to records, either by error or intentionally causing inaccuracies in financial information, financial statements. So we consider that through looking at estimates, journal entries, financial reporting, and whether we assess that risk as part of the rest of our procedures. So there were not any concerns that we identified in our current audit. And then one other area that we did specifically consider for 2022, you may have heard there has been some new accounting guidance coming out from the GASB requiring evaluation and reporting of lease activity in GAAP financial statements. And so, well, the transit does not have a significant amount of lease activity, but still was required to implement the standard, which involved looking at all of, identifying and evaluating all of its leases, and then figuring out how to properly report those, which added several financial statement balances to the financial statements, as well as several note disclosures to talk about that activity. So we did include that in our audit, looking at the process that was gone through to evaluate and report those, and making sure that we agreed with the accuracy of the way that those are presented in the financial statements. And again, like I said on the last page, we didn't identify any issues and are not reporting any issues in our report. The final area that we included in our audit was the federal grant compliance audit or single audit. Same audit scope, 2022. And the major program that we audited this year is assistance listing number 20.509, which is the formula grants for rural areas program. It's the majority, it makes up the majority of the transit's federal expenditures for 2022, about 90% of the total that was reported this year. And part of the reason I think it was that big is it included several different types of COVID funding as well that was used in 2022, both ARPA and CRRSA funding. And so a total of about almost $4.8 million. And so the audit of that includes looking, first of all, identifying each of the different types of funding in the contracts and evaluating specific requirements for those, as well as evaluating the federal compliance requirements and which of those are applicable in the current year to the transit's activities and the grants that were being used during the year. And then looking at control processes as well as assessing compliance for each of those areas as well. The results for the single audit are presented in the federal grant compliance report, similar to the financial statement report, where we give an opinion on compliance, which we have an unmodified opinion saying that we did not identify any compliance issues with the program that we audited this year. There are also no internal control issues that were noted. So again, no findings, and that is listed out in the report. I believe if there's any questions, we can either you can let me know right now, or we can come back in a couple of minutes after we get to that piece of it. Otherwise, I'll go ahead.
Do you have any questions right now?
We're pleased as punch.
You have a couple more minutes to think of them, so I'll go ahead and pass it on to go ahead and talk about some of the concluding wrap up of the audit. Scott, we can't hear you.
In the meantime, I'll cover this slide as he's coming over. So the reports that are in your packets are in draft, really just because we want to present them to you first before publishing on our website. But hearing no concerns, those would be published next week. A couple things happen as the reports are published. One, they are published on our website, as I mentioned. The second is that Paul, who's noted as our main contact, does get an email the day before so that he's aware that those will be published. That's part of our subscription service that is linked on this slide. So if anyone else is interested in Island Transit's reports or any other reports our office publishes, you have access to personalize that subscription. The third is an audit survey that, again, will go to Paul in an email, but is in that format intentionally so that it can be forwarded on to anybody who's interested in providing any feedback about our process, our presentations, or the product in the report. And then the fourth item that's actually not on the screen but related is the data collection form. So because we did a federal single audit, we will work with Paul in the new federal system to submit that for their consideration. And so that will happen in the next couple weeks. Closing remarks, Scott, do you want to test your mic again?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, but thank you, Dina. The good news is that we are going to come within our original estimates for the budget that we anticipated for this audit. And so the estimate we presented earlier in the audit and is in your packet, we're in alignment with that. And next year, as Jordan mentioned, we perform these same 3 audits each year, and we'll be doing another accountability audit as well as financial statement and federal program audit. And this is very standard for the transit. So we've also provided an estimate in the packet that is an estimate for those costs, so you can use as a budgeting item as well. And one thing I would really like to do is express some appreciation. I've talked with Jordan and other staff on the audit throughout the audit, and I haven't interacted specifically with Paul or Joseph or even really any of the other staff myself, but they've talked about how helpful both of them have especially been, we've had some very complex questions that came up during this audit, some that hadn't come up before. And I think the research that was done by Paul and Joseph and others to look into some of those things, specifically with the federal programs that we audited and some of the new financial items that we were looking at in the financial statements, it was pretty extensive. And so we did want to express that appreciation. The staff there has been very helpful. And from what I gather has been in the past as well, but this is my first experience with the transit. And so I do appreciate that welcoming.
Well, thank you very, very much. And we really appreciate you delaying because when our commissioners had to leave early, we voted on our annual budget. So thank you for your patience and letting us contact you later. But this is wonderful news. We knew we had a great person in Paul and Joseph, but it's nice to hear other people recognize it also. So thank you very much to the team, Dina. And I guess we'll look forward to seeing you guys next year. And hopefully we'll see you open up with big smiles on your faces because we sure have them. So thank you so much. And thank you again for letting us postpone you just a bit because this was really an important vote before we lost one of our commissioners. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Public. Can I suggest like a 5-minute break?
All right, a 5-minute break
Literally 5 minutes.
on hold.
Yeah.
And I'll let Lane be the timer. Yep. But I'm sure people will.
And guys, why don't you help yourself to some refreshments?
It's not
while we're doing that, please.
Get some more coffee.
I'd like to bring the Island Thrift Board meeting back to order, please. All right, next on the agenda is public comment. Was there any written public comment before the meeting, Meg?
There was not.
All right, thank you. If there are any members of the public, this is the time to set aside for you to speak to the board about subjects or concerns or interests or items not already set aside for public hearing. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comment may be ended or modified if the comments become disruptive or not germane to business at hand. Input requiring lengthier comment is best submitted in writing. Anyone from the public would like to make a comment? All right, I will close public comment. We have already done business item number 1, and we will go to business item number 2.
We need to do the consent agenda as well.
But I did. I asked about that earlier. I skipped. I did the roll call and did the consent agenda, and I believe Celine and Megan and everybody heard that because let me check. I think it was.
I think that was the approval of the agenda itself. I think we need to do the consent agenda.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have notes for the consent agenda
Okay.
being approved.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Seer to do the consent agenda and second by Ms. Bacon. All in favor for the consent agenda, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes. Thank you for the correction, Matt. All right. Business item number 2, surplus of vehicles.
And I can do that one.
Okay,
Tom is covered up there.
all right.
No, we're glad he's here. We have 3 vehicles. You'll see Exhibit A on the back of the draft resolution. This is beyond the blue page. These are 3 new, not new vehicles, 3 vehicles that we should have had on our earlier list that you surplus. Recall that we're surplusing vehicles, 4 of which will be involved in our community grant program, and then the rest will for auction. So we wanted to add these 3 since they are beyond their useful life, both miles and years. And so we are asking you to approve that as a resolution here that would allow us to then surplus those vehicles.
And were these part of the van pool program?
I don't know if they were the van pool, they, at some point they could have been service vehicles that we converted into to service vehicles, but yes, originally they were, yes, correct.
Any other questions? This is an action item. I would appreciate a motion and a second, please. I believe isn't this an action?
It is.
Yeah. Do you have it then? Okay. I move to approve resolution number 823 of the Board of Directors of Island County Public Transportation Benefit Area Corporation, declaring certain property described as attached and incorporated by this reference as Exhibit A is declared surplus, and the executive director or designee is authorized to dispose of the property as required by law.
Second. Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Bacon for resolution number 8-23, and we have a second by Councilman Bright for the same motion. All in favor, raise your hand.
Hold on. So when we surplus these, then what happens? They're in reasonable mechanical condition, they're drivable, they can get around, et cetera.
I can't say with exact certitude with regard to these three. It looks like Tom is shaking his head, yes.
These ones they'll go to auction through the Department of Enterprise Services through the Washtenaw program. And if they sell, they sell. If they don't sell, then they'll go to other. Those are the two.
Okay.
And these auction, the money brought in from that will go back into replacement vehicles
Or just our budget.
Yeah.
or the service
It
budget?
goes back to finance then.
Okay.
Appropriated.
Any other questions? All in favor? Raise your hand or say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, it passes. All right, now we go to the director's report, and I think Megan handed out one. It's not handy to go back and find it on your computer.
Well, thank you, Chair Munns. I want to begin by thanking you on behalf of the rest of the board and also of the Island Transit staff for your years of service. You've been part of the Island Transit family directly since 2018, actually just a little bit before I was hired. You were part of the team that hired me. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. But as all of you know, our board chair, Councilmember Munns, has been an outstanding public servant, not just at Island Transit, but throughout her career and including up in Oak Harbor and her life in the Navy, supporting her husband and the work that they together have done. And we're really grateful for your leadership here. You've been our board chair for the last 3 years. And you've also served on the Island Regional Transportation Organization as our representative and done an outstanding job for us there. But more importantly, throughout the years, you've been a great friend and supporter to the Island Transit family. Some of you may know when I moved into my house, the first person that came to my house was Councilmember Munns. And not only did she come with well wishes, but with champagne and bakery goods from Chris's, and it was just a nice way to welcome me to Oak Harbor, and it's grateful.
Part of the culture. I mean, Chris's
Yeah.
Bakery. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, and notice my protuberance.
Yeah.
So, but along the way, you've also done so many other things, including obviously chairing this organization. During the pandemic, you helped us with your ties with the nonprofit Help House and others to make sure that we were doing what we could to support our community, including we did some deliveries of food that you helped us organize, which we were grateful for. And then, of course, your ties to the Navy were invaluable, helping Celine and all of us gain access to the base, both in terms of our on-demand service and then also for recruitment efforts and just publicizing the service that we have that the Navy community could use. And we're forever grateful for all those doors that you've opened for us, and just been a fun person for all of us to have. And as I mentioned earlier, the kindness that you showed to our staff, including today, just really want to thank you for your service. So if you give her. Want to say anything?
Yes. this has been an experience. I never thought I would work with buses. It's just kind of like the clean water facility. I never thought I would put much interest into flushing toilets and how it was sterilized and all this kind of stuff. Same thing with the oil and the gears and the scheduling and all of that. Paul helped me through, I've done the finance through the city, but it is different. And my favorite is your whiteboard that's got, okay, grant money, bus, van, whatever, where they are in the thing. I'm a very visual person, so that was great. Robin, explaining maybe a new term that isn't used with our HR. I really appreciate that. And Tom being my seatmate on but your idea to get the toolboxes and make it happen, not just wait. But as soon as you could get part of and keeping. And Mr. Sean. Well, why are we still doing this? Getting calls from people and you've got the numbers, you spend them. And you have that nanosecond if someone catches you off guard in the hallway or professionals and having an officer, I think that's helped the wraps and videos and all of that. I think it's helped Island Transit be out there and people are more aware. Have people come up to me and go, wow, there's one, it's got hiring on it, and clever. And so you guys are a gift to the community. The board, thank you so much. I'm not perfect, as you know, but I try hard and I've enjoyed meeting every one of you. And please relay that to Janet. So hopefully someone has not eaten your cookie, but this is the only thing I could think of. I just wanted to let you guys know you're all special. And I will miss coming to board meetings, believe it or not.
You can still come.
Well, you might come occasionally and I'll do public comments, so we have someone there.
Well, thank you so much.
So, thank you guys.
Also wanna, thank Paul and staff for doing a great job with the budget and then also the audit. As you know, we thought this year the audit would go quickly and for whatever reason, staffing or whatever it was in the auditor's office, it just took forever. It was nothing on our part. And to have to manage that while working through 2 new software systems that we're implementing and then the regular budget process, I mean, oh my goodness, but the budget, thank you, Paul, thank you for the audit and good results, of course, and that's so important to all of us. And of course, I want to thank Robin as well for the great job with the wage study. That's been a long haul as well, and we're glad to be at this milestone. Obviously, we have a lot more work to do in terms of rolling it out with staff and that aspect, which is so critical, and we're working on that, so that's good. And then lastly, rather than go over my report, just wanted to mention, we also had some great milestones with regard to our zero emission transition. Specifically, we've got the 2 battery electric chargers. They've been installed, they've been commissioned, and now the only remaining thing is, maybe I used the wrong word. I did use the wrong word. I guess the remaining thing is the third thing that has to be done is commissioning, which is basically flipping the switch. And so we're there, and that's going to be great to help us with our transition. And then the other bit of good news we had just this week, Tom and Meg did a great job with one of the review boards of this, an agency that's never done design build is able to do that and gives us the permission to actually do that. And they had to prepare all this information. They did it without me, which was wonderful. And the consultant helped them and they did a great job. And we found out that, yes, we are going to be able to use the design build process for our hydrogen fueling infrastructure. And so we're really excited about getting the permission to do that. It was a big accomplishment. So thank you. And then you can just read my report for the rest of stuff if
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your report.
Really quickly, with the respect for everyone's time, I'll be reporting for October of 2023. And I think the slides will follow on, but we've switched slides now for the first one. Here we go. So cash sources, probably the most important thing to look at, again, is sales tax revenue. It was down slightly 0.38% against previous year's October figure. Next slide. If we look at it against budget, it was down 3.28%, or about $5,600. You can see what is always interesting to me is the green line, where we're looking at where we are versus budget. And it kind of gives us an idea of people's spending patterns in the economy, and of course, our benefit from that. And we forecasted our looked at our above last year's actuals, and you can see that we're right about at where we were last year, which is a little bit below what we budgeted for the year, or for the month. But for the year, we would expect 83.33%, and we're at 83.29%, so 0.04%. So we're really basically right on where we predicted for the October. Next slide, please. No contract revenue. We're still waiting for monies to be allocated and contracts to be finalized from WisDOT. They're waiting for our single audit report before they'll do that. So now you see we just got approved by the auditors, and that'll go to WisDOT, and then they'll send us our contracts, and then we'll be able to bill and then get our reimbursement. So there's a long process with that.
So a month or two before money arrives?
Probably at least 2 months.
Count on 6, and then, then you can say hallelujah when it comes in.
Yeah, and some of that money will still be July 2023. So just give you an idea of the process and the lag time. Next slide. Investment interest and rates. You can see again, this is just a summary of comparing ourselves to the LGIP and the 2-year treasury. And the ICTIP is the green line, that and where it's LGIP is the orange. And of course, the latest news is interest rates are falling. So I would anticipate next month for at least that orange and blue lines to drop. And I'm not, I think that the ICTIP is more steady because they invest on basically a 3-year timeline. So we'll just see how that all sorts out. But for right now, you can see we received interest of a little over $100,000, and that was up about $8,000 from last month, and we have 58.5 million invested. So ICTIP was up 8 basis points, or 4%. Next slide, please. Cash uses, I'll just say our payroll was up about almost $20,000, 2% from last month, and up about 120,000 or 15% from last year. The payables figures, we were down about 244,000, but you know, the timing of big capital payments, they tend to, of course, create big fluctuations, especially if we have like a bus purchase in 1 month and not a bus purchase, you know, a year later in that same month. Next slide. October capital payments. You can see what we spent on capital tools, which were already mentioned, and Annunciator for about 58,000 there. Expense, at least consulting, charge residuals on IT equipment and propane bag machine. If we look at our cash reserve, you can see our cash increased about 238,711, and you can see where we stand in cash was slightly over $60 million. And you can see that graphically again, the slight increase relative on this chart, but still very healthy reserves. Budget actual, I should highlight that we're below budget in several categories. We're I should say above budget on the revenue side in most categories, relevant categories. Local sales tax, as I mentioned, we're slightly behind, 0.04% behind, but still above interest, state and federal operating grants like 4 or 5 months behind in the billing of those. So we received a large, similar to what's going to happen next year, is we received January and February. It's going to happen again. In those areas, catching up for 2023 by any, but it, well, federal still had 99% just to receive in 2023. In total, slightly behind the 80. Which, but when you look at the other side, and you can flip to the next slide, we're at 39. We would normally think we would be at 83%. So we're as a curve, both have not matched our for a number of reasons, of course. Not hiring as many people as we thought, for example, and then on the revenue side, not to build grants in this same time frame that we expected. So in low budget in all categories except for communications and insurance, with the and only spending slightly under 50, really below 40%.
So those are capital expenses that we're gonna need to do.
Yeah, a lot of them are gonna roll over. Transit center, for example.
Okay.
And it's just haven't started yet, or at least not the big numbers.
Right, okay.
Do you think it'll roll over again next year?
No, some will, definitely. Yeah.
And that concludes my presentation.
I just want to say this has been a big day for you, Paul. A great word.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's
Yes.
right, for you.
So I want to observe the effect of all of this validation we got from the auditor is grants that came through, that came pouring in immediately. Who knows how they had to be managed from this side? And Paul, you did that, and with no findings and no management letters, and that's really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I often wondered how that would play out, because we got millions via that.
So I know we've got a time crunch. I'm wondering, Chair, if we could go quickly to the executive session.
Yes, Matt, how much time will we need for that before I announce it?
Todd, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
I'd say 10 minutes, yeah.
All right.
How many? 10?
10.
All right,
Yeah,
and
get-
you're the keeper of that?
I got it, yeah.
All right, I am going to close the regular business meeting at this time and transition to the.
Please.
I would like to bring back our board meeting at this time. We are no longer in executive session, and is there action that people want to take?
I move to approve the purchase of parcels R 13235-025-4870 and parcel 413-101-533-0470 and authorize Executive Director Todd Morrow to complete the property purchase and execute any documents necessary for that purpose.
Can I just add a little bit of language at the purchase price set forth in the purchase and sale agreement?
So moved.
So,
Matt, could you send those extra few words so that we can make sure we have a complete motion for Meg?
I will
She's
do
shaking
that,
her
yes.
head, so I think that would help. All right, we have a motion and a second. The motion made by Councilman Jenny Bright and a second by Councilman Craig Sear. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It passes unanimously.
I
Second
move,
motion?
I move to authorize Executive Director Todd Morrow on behalf of the Island Transit Board of Directors to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Whidbey Camino Land Trust, allowing certain easements to be revised and or removed.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion to work with the Camino,
Would-be Camino Land Trust.
Land Trust. Motion made by Councilman Jenny Bright and seconded by Councilman Craig Sears. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed, it passes unanimously.
Wow.
Can we high five? I mean, this is
Yes.
huge.
Okay,
There you go.
we all pass it down.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments before we adjourn? Again, it's been a pleasure, but I would like somehow, as much as you've mentioned in the pay scales and stuff, if we do not, if our area of advertisement, like for operators or some of the other positions, mechanics or whatever, can we expand scope? I know that Associated Washington Cities has a job posting, and I don't know if the county association might have that, but just try to get it out. You never know. There could be a Navy couple, and one of them is in the Navy and the other one isn't, but they just happen to have an expertise that could be handy. I'm just trying to say, how can we pull this in? But also check with, Everett, I know you have the school district here in town. I think I've heard that they pay
$7 an hour, is that right?
$7 an hour more than what we're paying our operators. Plus, they do it in the morning, they do it in the afternoon, and they have the middle open. So, I don't know, and other people would rather start their route and then finish it, and then have all that other time. So I'm just trying to propose that if we don't have drivers, we don't have a route. And, we don't want to overpay, but we definitely have to be competitive somehow. So,
Roger that.
but other than that,
I have one thing. I had a chance to page through this, and I would really like to see the actual job titles that the individual 33 job titles.
Yep, that's what we're working on, pulling all that.
Okay, all right.
me too, even if I'm here till the end of the month, I
We'll
have
get
an
it.
official meeting on the 27th. Otherwise,
Oh, wait. I actually opened this and it was, let me find it here. I think it's at the back. Yeah, we should look at the back page here. You might find a familiar face in this, I've come to expect that you are an executive officer or something for literally every regional, national, states. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if I opened up the southeast version of the bus coalition and find out that Todd's an advisor to it or something like that.
yet he still makes all our meetings, which is.
I don't know how you did
Yeah. Thank you.
That, anything else, or Meg?
Nope.
Lance, are you still there?
I am, and I'd like to say something, Beth.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Beth, this is for you. I will miss my favorite chairwoman. My best wishes to you, Beth, for many years ahead filled with good health and happiness. And thank you so much for all that you've done for the rest of us.
It's been a pleasure to serve, but I'm humbled because you have really opened up a lot of education that I will carry forth and hopefully transpire to my 4-year-old granddaughter as she grows up. So thank you all very much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.